The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. Part 3.
5.
You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10x10x10 tangent cube of science. And we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Everest Plateau. And we are continuing with our deep dive book report into the Book of the Damned by Charles Fort, the origin of Fortean science, Fortean phenomena, Fortean strangeness. But before that, we have some space weather news, and we also have a returning guest, Chris Cottrell from the Dabbler's Den, who has been looking into the Carolina Bays for a long time. He's also a teacher. He's been on the show before, and we have him back for the first segment to talk about some of his research. Chris, thanks for coming back on the show, man.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, buddy. Good to
We've already been talking pre-show. We've already been bickering and arguing about
my ears are turning a little red. That's okay, though.
So I think it's going to be a good discussion on the Carolina Bays. But first, let's have some space weather news. From spaceweather.com, several new sunspots are emerging in both of the sun's hemispheres. Amateur astronomers, here is where to look. This is a link to witness sunspot genesis. It is too soon to say if these young, active regions will eventually pose any threat for flares. And also, the Tonga volcanic eruption touched the mesosphere. Mesosphere? Mesosphere?
Mesosphere?
The messy sphere. When a volcano exploded out of the Pacific Ocean near Tonga on January 15th, scientists immediately realized they were witnessing something special. Little did they know how special. A new analysis of images from Earth orbiting satellites shows that the plume punched a hole in our atmosphere all the way up to the messy sphere. Bedka and colleagues combined images from two satellites, NOAA's GOES-17 and Japan's Himawari-8, both of which observed the eruption using similar infrared cameras from different points in geosynchronous orbit. Using the mathematics of stereogeometry, the team calculated that the plume rose to 58 kilometers or 36 miles at its highest point. For comparison, the largest known volcanic plume in the satellite era before Tonga came from Mount Pinatubo, which spewed ash and aerosols up to 35 kilometers or 22 miles in the air above the Philippines in 1991. The Tonga plume was 1.5 times the height of Pinatubo, making it the tallest of the space age. Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you think anything is still in orbit? I mean, did it go that high?
Did it throw stuff into low Earth orbit? That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know, but there's definitely stuff, that the effects that are going to be raining down Fort style for years to come. All this ash and particulates and the aerosols and weird gases are going to be combining in the atmosphere and doing strange things.
Hey, you guys, by the way, we are also joined by the Watcher.
Oh, yeah, Watcher.
But I wanted to let you guys know we need to turn the notifications off.
Yeah, I'm muting it. Sorry.
God dang it, Chris.
Yeah.
Rookie mistake. No problem. Hate to see it
All right,
happen.
got it. Continue.
Current conditions, solar wind speed is 510.6 kilometers per second, and the density is 7.7 protons per cubic centimeter. Current sunspot number is 48. The neutron count is only 6.3% above the space age average. This keeps dropping. The KP index right now is 2, which is quiet, and the 24-hour max is only a 3, which is the top end of the quiet range. And that is your space weather news for the week.
So the Watcher posts about the mesosphere, the region of the Earth's atmosphere above the stratosphere and below the thermosphere, about 30 and 50 miles in altitude. I guess 30 to 50 miles, maybe?
Yeah, between 30 and 50 miles.
Okay.
It's also extremely cold in the mesosphere. That's actually what helps break up most of our debris coming in from outer space. It gets super hot and then instantly gets really, really, really cold. That's causes it to break up. Yeah.
Nice. All right.
Messy sphere. That's pretty good.
Yeah, messy sphere. Crypto update. Bitcoin is $43,188.03, and Ethereum is $2,914.74. So the market is going up a little bit from when it was down. So it's basically, like the watcher said before the show started, it's in its normal down phase. It has come up from being really down. Now it's just down.
Yeah, sucky town.
Yep. All right, Chris, where are we going with Carolina Bays? What's happening?
All right, well, so, as the listeners know, I've been on before, really being a cheerleader for, the Carolina Bays being part of a Younger Dryas story. And a little over a year ago, I came across some newer evidence that kind of changed my mind. And then so I did kind of feel like it was kind of a big deal. I've made a couple of videos about it. My timing has been terrible, though. I have had zero time to put towards, hardly any of this over the past year. But I do appreciate the chance to kind of come on and talk about it with you guys for sure.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah, man. Glad to have you.
Yeah. So anyways, I came across, it was actually a conversation I was having with Michael Davies. And I'm not sure if everyone remembers, but Michael Davies, he's the one who's responsible for all of the LiDAR images that are on Google Earth through his syntos.org website. And it's available to anybody. You guys everyone can go on there and download his program and run it with your Google Earth Pro. And his idea of the Carolina Bays is a little bit different from, say, myself at the time and Antonio Zamora's, where he thinks it happened a much longer time ago. And the mechanism was a little bit different too. I think Antonio Zamora, he talks a lot about ice boulders being ejected from an impact into the Laurentide ice sheet. And Michael Davies, his idea is more of like an ejecta sheet of a mix of sand and water and things like that. And so they have a lot of dissimilarities when it comes to their idea. But, bottom line, the Carolina Bays were created as secondary effects of an impact into the Laurentide ice sheet. It just has to do with timing. And so anyways, I was having a conversation with Michael Davies, and he made the comment about how the coastal plain is super flat. He was making a comment that it's flatter than like a pool table top. And I can remember having this conversation with him and thinking about, where I live here in coastal Georgia, we have ancient barrier islands, which are high and dry. These are areas where we have sandhill communities, and it's just a totally different ecosystem, from the swamps and things that we have around here. You'll just have all of a sudden a stretch of land that's 20, 30 feet higher than the rest of it. It's sandy. We have gopher tortoises and things like that. And I can remember thinking, I was like, that's not true. We it's not pool table flat. We have these ancient barrier islands and these Paleoatlantic shorelines all up and down the East Coast. And after that thought, I kind of went and looked it up, and there's very little scientific papers on these topics, and then you have to really dig deep to try to find some of this stuff. But what I ended up doing was taking the Paleoatlantic shorelines and matching them up with the marine oxygen isotope data that was collected from the Greenland and the Antarctic ice core data. We talk about it all the time because that's where they get a lot of the information for the different stages and things like that with the sea level rises. And when I did that, I was able to see that in the past, we have times where sea levels were actually higher than they are today. Keeping in mind that during the Ice Age, sea levels were a lot lower, right? They were a lot farther out into the ocean, and they pretty much rose about 400 feet since the glacial maximum anyways. And so they've kind of risen in a couple different stages, meltwater pulse 1A and then 1B. And then about 6,000 years ago, things kind of leveled off, and we've been pretty stable ever since then. But when you go back and you look at the different marine stages and where those ancient Paleoatlantic shorelines, you can actually match up like the shoreline that was here 125,000 years ago during the Eemian. That's marine oxygen isotope stage 5E. That's the scientific name that they get it. That is actually coming from the Greenland and the Antarctic ice cores. The time before that, there was one about 400,000 years ago where the sea levels were higher than they were even 125,000 years ago. And then a million years ago, sea levels were even higher than that. It would have been about 70 feet higher than they are today.
So what are the three stages? 30 feet, 125,000 years ago?
Yeah, so basically every time the sea level rises like that, it creates what's called a terrace. And it's basically like right now, our modern coastline is like the newest terrace is being created, unless the level does continue to rise and it wipes it clean, right?
Yeah.
So if the sea level were to drop, then we would be left with this terrace here. And it actually does have a name. I think it's Princess Anne or something like that. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But the one that was created 125,000 years ago is called the Pamlico Terrace. And that's about 30 feet higher than it is than our current shoreline. So 30 feet up in elevation, we have the Pamlico Terrace. 42 feet above our current ocean level, we have the Talbot Terrace. And then, like I said, 69 feet above our current ocean level, we have the Pena-Holloway Terrace. So we have these three different terraces that we can look at, on the coastal plain, pretty much all up and down the East Coast. And one of the things that I noticed, and again, I was trying to prove Michael Davies wrong. I was trying to be like, no, it's not pool table flat. We have these things here, and we should be able to find these Carolina bays there. But when I looked at it, it wasn't a case of where the Carolina bays were. It was more of a case of where they're not.
Yeah.
And what I saw was that, right where the Pamlico Terrace is, which was 125,000 years ago, there's like zero. There's like hardly any Carolina bays under that 30 feet in elevation. If you go above that, like to the Talbot, we do find Carolina bays between 30 and 42 feet, but they're like super heavily eroded. But then above 42 feet, we find like really well-defined Carolina bays. And that's an area that has been exposed, it hasn't been affected by the ocean at all for a million years. And so just that alone, to me, that like knocked out the Younger Dryas as being a possible, creation date for the Carolina bays. And then, like I said, that it took me about 2 months of trying to discredit myself until I finally had to say, I can't. This is just the evidence is too hard, and I have to, I have to eat it. Yeah.
Well, I think that a couple of questions arise, and we did talk about this a little bit before we started the show. One is like storm surges or tsunamis. But to me, I see, we're looking at one of the maps, and I'll post, if you can send me these pictures, I can put them in the show notes for people to look at those too.
Or we can just post the whole PDF in there.
Oh, yeah, well, it's a Google Doc. I guess I could download it.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can just give people the link to look at it, if you can share it with everybody.
That's fine.
Yeah. So the ones that are in between the two that are heavily eroded, that's a pretty good indication. But again, let's go through the questions. What about storm surges? What about tsunamis? Like, could there have been a huge storm that pushed water, just on these coastlines over the past 8 or 10,000 years that could have eroded these bays that are near the shore?
I had this conversation with you can actually, if you go through my YouTube videos and like go through the comments, like every other comment has been basically the same thing.
Okay.
And like I said, it's been about 6,000 years that sea levels have been pretty stable. And so any storm that's going to cause like a 30-foot rise in sea level, and again, that would be super temporary too, because when we talk about storm surge, it kind of comes in and goes out.
Yeah. It only needs a day or two. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
how strong are the bays in terms of structure? I mean, like, wouldn't
they're well defined in those areas.
Yeah. I'm just saying, would a storm surge erase a bay if it had a day or two of serious waves?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, there are plenty of like sand dune formations and things like that. If you go and look at where Category 5 hurricanes have hit, that have withstood a storm surge from even if you go to like the Gulf of Mexico, where Katrina went through, there's plenty of, places along the beach where you could still see that they're noticeable. So we're talking about like a complete wipe clean all up and down the East Coast that would have
Yeah, I mean, and there's plenty of places too where it's just flat after those storms, where there were dunes.
Yeah, but how high though? How high? I mean, we're talking about all the way up to 30 feet.
I don't know if it was 30 feet, but maybe 12.
Yeah. So, but like I was saying, there's really no archaeological evidence of that happening. There's really no geological evidence of that happening. We would be able to see like, tons of like saltwater intrusion. There would be all kinds of evidence of, just rack lines, from these major events. Even George Howard published something on his Cosmic Tusk website about basically the same thing. It wasn't in this context, but it was basically like, where are the tsunamis? Where are these things? And the only thing that he came up with was there was one line of evidence in the Outer Banks where there was an area that kind of got wiped and it's an unexplained, they're not sure if it was a tsunami or what happened there.
Okay.
So there should be evidence of that, if it happened within the 6,000 years. But again, we have, Native American inhabitants, all up and down the East Coast. There's all kinds of artifacts, all kinds of villages, things like that. And if these things were happening over the past 6,000 years, I don't think we'd have any evidence of any of that. And again, we're talking about, the evidence that I see, by matching the marine oxygen isotope data with the Paleoatlantic shorelines, that's hard data. That's
okay.
That is evidence.
I have a question then. How does this affect the complex theory? Because I mean, if these shorelines are so like in the landscape is robust enough to withstand a storm surge or whatever, the complex theory seems to suggest that this is like the land.
Again, we have to go into this assuming that's wrong anyways.
Well, yeah, I mean,
yes,
we all do that. But
I on one of my videos I talked about it being like comparing which shade of purple tastes the best, because it's not until the Carolina Bays have been proven as being impact features, then who cares? It's all speculation anyways.
Okay, I think he just gave you the equivalent of that's not a great question, Kyle.
Okay.
No, it is.
All right, fine.
And here's why it's a good question is because if these bays are found out to be older than, because if you look at the literature on Carolina Bays, even with that complex theory, they're all still within that like 100,000 year range. And basically, this is saying that, no, these things have been around for a whole lot longer than all of that. And so everything that they're researching and studying there within these bays have just accumulated afterwards. They're all, these are things that have affected the bays after they were formed.
Yeah.
So, if they're looking at, if they find a piece of evidence and they carbon date it, well, that's because it arrived after the bays. The bays have already been there. They've been there for a long time. So, and again, that throws shade on that as well, because like I said, that not only does that go against like, us saying that it's the Younger Dryas, but it also goes against the main scientific community saying that it's, these things are, they formed over the past 100,000 years, something like that. But this right here says that, no, we have bays, we have areas that should have bays where they're not. And
that implies that they're more than 400.
Older, yeah.
They're more than 400,000 years old.
Yeah. And I would say that the lower shoreline where you don't find bays, and then the slightly higher terrace where you can see extremely eroded bays, and then the highest terrace where they're very clearly laid out, really would destroy that idea, because they're trying to say that they all formed. I guess I'm trying to figure out what the deal is with the complex theory. Like they formed under a certain conditions. Where it was like they formed under certain weather conditions almost, because you had to have this wind. Well, then you have to explain how that happened when the sea levels were at these different heights at different times, but somehow the conditions were the same for them to form.
Yeah. And if you look hard enough at that image, you'll see that some of the bays are they're like in half. Something happened that caused that bay. It's not like they formed half a bay.
Yeah, they've been truncated by the terrace. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So this should be pretty. Again, you guys are talking about the Book of the Damned, anyways, and this should be pretty damning.
Yeah, it is damning, and it does fit with weird stuff falling from the sky. I think that this is, to me, this is interesting because Randall still is like he doesn't have an idea of what formed the bays, but I still think he's floating around the aerial burst.
Yeah.
So it would be a secondary effect, but not quite as secondary as ejecta.
Yeah, and I did send this to Randall. I never got something back from him.
Randall's super busy.
Yeah,
and I don't think he actually reads email. So
So let's talk about the archaeological sites, right? Before the show we talked about how there are archaeological sites on the coastlines. So for people who are thinking, well, maybe these were like more recent storm surges that wiped them out. How does that fit in?
Like I said, I'm not really sure. I don't know if I haven't looked to see if there are any Clovis sites like lower than 30 feet in these areas. I did point out before the show that there is a Clovis archaeological site that's actually under the ocean. It's underwater at Gray's Reef. It's off the coast of Savannah and Sapelo Island. It's about I think it's about 30 feet underwater, but it's an old when it was exposed, it would have been a chert outcropping, kind of like the one we were talking about earlier.
The Topper site?
Yeah, the Topper site. It would have been a kind of a match of the Topper site, from what I understand.
So it would have been a quarry. Is that the idea?
Yeah, a quarry, right.
Okay.
Yeah. Or a manufacturing site or something like that.
Yeah.
And so there is evidence there that there were Clovis people before sea level even rose to today's levels.
Yeah.
So I don't know when that would have been. But
so Clovis sites are not a great indicator of when the bays were formed, because they can be under the ocean right now because the oceans were so much lower back then.
Yeah. I think most of them probably are. We just haven't seen them yet.
What would be really interesting is if there was a Clovis site in a bay under the ocean.
Yeah. There hasn't been. There hasn't been one. They found points in the rims of bays. As far as like there being like an actual site like inside of a bay, not that I know of.
I guess the rim of a bay would make more sense, because if the bay was holding water, I mean, the camp would be. Yeah,
and that was the story that I was told from Chris Moore, that they would use the rims as camps.
Yeah,
and that's why you see a lot of that stuff there. Now again, when I thought it was a Younger Dryas related event, I could just imagine these ice chunks falling down and smashing things to pieces, and the only thing left behind are the stone fragments, in the rims.
Yeah.
And I think I even mentioned that on the show, and because I think the event happened the same. I think the event happened the same way that.
Yeah. So we're still talking about an airburst or ejecta from an impact or something. Yeah.
Or the Laurentide ice sheet in the Michigan area.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the geology of Michigan, there's the Michigan Basin there. And to me, that's just, it's like a bullseye target saying, hey, there was an impact here, guys. Let's wake up and take a look at it.
So what about, say the glacial positions and how low the glaciers were back at that time?
There's no telling. There's really no telling. The one thing that I did point out to Antonio Zamora, because obviously after I came out with this, we've maintained friendship, but we definitely are viewing things a little bit differently now. And I had kind of like he posted a video about his ideas, and I had to kind of counter it. And that's all on YouTube. You guys can check that out. But
I got a YouTube fight going on, so it's happening.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a fight. Like I said, it's cordial. We're friends, but the Laurentide ice sheet, has we've gone through multiple ice ages, over the past 800,000 years or so.
Yeah.
And each succeeding one erases the evidence of the one before.
And I'm not trying to. I'm sorry?
I said each succeeding one erases a lot of the evidence of the one before it. That's the hard
part.
Yeah,
but I don't want to take away from like the Younger Dryas impact stuff at all, because obviously something major happened then. I just want to separate out the Carolina Bays from that now.
You're detaching the kooky caboose, man.
Well, I think the Comet,
that's true.
Yeah, I think the Comet Research Group detached it a long time ago. So you're just, I mean, that.
You're shoving it off into the. Go ahead.
Well, now that I see it with this evidence, I kind of cringe now when I hear it, being related to the Younger Dryas. So I'm like, no, let's not confuse these things. Let's get this Younger Dryas thing solved. And it's the same thing with George Howard saying, I don't really like talking about it. Then he'll talk about it for an hour, but
right, yeah.
But
no, but it's cool. I think the evidence is compelling. I mean, it's a really good good thing to point out. It makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, it was going to take a lot to change my mind, and that did it. So, and I don't expect everybody to run out and jump off the bandwagon here, but. Like I said, the Younger Dryas event definitely happened. I just don't think the Carolina Bays are part of it right now. There's still evidence out there that still gets me scratching my head. For instance, the lack of megafaunal remains, within that ejecta curtain, within where we find the Carolina Bays. It seems like that would be like great habitat for a lot of these mega mammals that would have left fossil evidence behind, and we really don't see any of that there. And so there's still, compelling evidence that this could be wrong, and then it could go right back to being a Younger Dryas and an event thing. But for right now, for me, I got to kind of separate the two.
Well, I think that all of this stuff is still up in the air. Where before you presented this evidence, I would have said that I would be more inclined to think it did have something to do with the Younger Dryas. Now I'm more inclined to say probably not, but that doesn't mean that won't change in the future with different evidence.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how solid is the evidence for the timeline of those sea levels?
Well, like I said, as far as finding any papers that are linking them to Carolina Bays, there is none.
There's none.
No, but I mean the presence and timeline for the different sea levels.
Yeah, that's based on oxygen isotopes from the ice cores. Yeah.
Right.
So like how solid is that linkage? Is basically the question. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I was able to take that stuff, but there's really not a lot of papers out there, published work, combining these things together, and so there's obviously some room for error there, but improvement for sure.
But do they normally use the isotope data from the ice cores to match timelines for shorelines?
Yeah, they do, because they end up using the oxygen stages, that 5E. And they match that up to, like I said, what was the Pamlico.
Okay, so that is a well-regarded, normally solid scientific connection. There is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah. So, like I said, that's hard data. It's hard data. It's hard to ignore. I don't see a lot of listeners, high-fiving me.
Well, hopefully they will. I think.
Man, we'll give you a high one.
Yeah.
We're all snakes over here. Yeah. So we only got one.
That's right. Yeah. In true Snake Brother fashion, be 99.9% wrong
all the time. That's right. Exactly. So we're expecting this to be wrong also in the future. At some point.
I understand that too. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate you coming back on the show.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next time.
Okay, man.
All right.
Bye.
We'll be right back. Back, ladies and gentlemen. Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies. Ancient shit. Where there are no degrees, only certificates of ignorance, which you have to print yourself. And you must subscribe to the Manual for How the Universe Works, Final Edition.
Man, that would be a great newsletter name. If we had a Snake Bros newsletter, it would just be like the Manual for How the Universe Works, Final Edition.
We're not going to do a newsletter, folks.
It comes out once a month, and it's always right, even if it completely contradicts the last one.
Yeah. And so we dive back into the Book of the Damned for part 5? 3, sir.
Also, I am still getting over you guys heard last week I was getting into a cold. Now I'm getting out of it. I still have the cough and the residuals, but
Yeah, not so bad.
so there's going to be a lot of
All right. And also we have the Watcher with us. Come on, buddy. What's
from
going on?
deep beneath his secret space station in secret outer space. How you doing, Watcher?
Oh man, doing great. Glad to be here for a second show in a row. Sorry for my absence. The space ambulance business has been a little bit out of my control.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been being shuttled around to different orbits like once a week, and it's hard to keep in touch.
A little bit.
We have to move our ground antenna every time you move.
So I like that idea of the newsletter, especially when you've got like final edition, space, volume 34.
Right, exactly. Final edition.
We'll have Brenner do it.
Yeah, that's a great
We
idea.
can get Brenner to start
perfect.
the newsletter.
All right, so we are working our way through Charles Fort's The Book of the Damned. I put links in the show notes to buy yourself a physical or digital copy, and also links to the Audible version, which was done by our friends over at Grimerica, because I am not reading everything by any means. Last week we finished up with worms falling in snow. So we're going to be continuing with that theme a bit here from the, let's see, what do you think that one is? Transient Sock of London. The Transactions of the Entomological Society of London.
Uh-huh.
What do you think of that? In 1871, records snowing of larvae in Silesia in 1806. Quote, appearance of many larvae on the snow, unquote. In Saxony, 1811. Larvae found alive on the snow in 1828. Larvae and snow which fell together in the Eifel, January 30th, 1847. And fall of insects, January 24th, 1849 in Lithuania. Occurrence of larvae estimated at 300,000 on the snow in Switzerland in 1856. The compiler says that most of these larvae live underground or at the roots of trees, and that whirlwinds uproot trees and carry away the larvae, conceiving of them not as not held in masses of frozen earth, all as neatly detachable as currents in something. In a different magazine that I can't name, 1849, there is an account of the fall in Lithuania, January 24th, 1849, that black larvae had fallen in enormous numbers. Larvae thought to have been of beetles, but described as caterpillars, not seen to fall, but found crawling on the snow after a snowstorm at Warsaw, January 20th, 1850. Flammarion in the Atmosphere, page 414, tells of a fall of larvae that occurred January 30th, 1869 in a snowstorm. Quote, they could not have been hatched in the neighborhood, for during the days preceding the temperatures had been very low, unquote. These were said to have been of a species common in the south of France. In another journal, it is said that with these larvae, there were developed insects, so they're not all in their larval stages. On the last of January, 1890, there fell in a great tempest in Switzerland incalculable numbers of larvae, some black and some yellow, in numbers so great that hosts of birds were attracted. Altogether, Fort says, we regard this as one of our neatest expressions for external origins and against the whirlwind explanation. If an exclusionist says that, in January, larvae were precisely and painstakingly picked out of frozen ground in incalculable numbers, he thinks then of a tremendous force and disregarding its refinements. But then if origin and precipitation be not far apart, what becomes of an infinitude of other debris, conceiving of no time for segregation? If he thinks of a long translation all the way from the south of France to the north of France, he may then think of a very fine sorting by differences of specific gravity. But in such a fine selection, larvae would be separated from developed insects. As to differences in specific gravity, if the yellow larva that fell in Switzerland in January were 3 times the size of the black larva that fell with them, then in accounts of this occurrence, there is no denial of this fall.
Yeah.
Or that a whirlwind never brought them together or held them together and precipitated them and only them together. And then he names this, it's Genesistrine, I think is how you would pronounce it. Genesis, the place of Genesis. Genesistrine or Genesistrine. So there's no escape from it. We'll be persecuted for this. Take it or leave it. Genesistrine. The notion is that there is somewhere aloft a place of origin of life relatively to this Earth. Whether it's the planet Genesistrine or the moon or a vast amorphous region superjacent to this Earth or an island in the Super Sargasso Sea should perhaps be left to the researchers of other super or extra geographers. That the first unicellular organisms may have come here from Genesistrine, or that men or anthropomorphic beings may have come here before amoeba, that upon Genesistrine there may have been an evolution expressible in conventional biologic terms, but that evolution upon this Earth has been induced by external influences, that evolution as a whole upon this Earth has been a process of population by immigration or by bombardment. So this is really close to like panspermia.
Yeah.
Except that we're talking about whole multicellular organisms showing up, not just
Right.
microbiology.
If it was, if cyclones or tornadoes or whatever would pick stuff up like that, it seems like you'd have very commonly, there would be just like falls of rocks of roughly all the same sizes.
And if it was sorting by specific gravity, it should be all the larvae and everything else that weighed the same as them.
Yeah.
Right. It should. Well, I guess you could argue that the two things that would act on sorting would be the weight and then wind resistance,
Right.
or lack thereof, right?
So
So the
everything-
leaves would get blown away from the larva even if they weighed close to the same.
Yeah. It's just like you get a rock in the beans,
Yes, and you
They're
can't.
always about the same size.
Yeah, a pebble in the
Maybe
beans.
slightly smaller, but they weigh about the same. So there's a couple of different
Yeah.
factors.
Yes.
But of course, if you did go up in an airplane and you dumped multiple bags of beans out, there's going to be a rock or two in there, but nobody's going to notice that. They're going to see that like all these beans fell.
That's right. That's right.
The few rocks and stuff that were roughly the same size that were sorted with the beans are probably not going to be noticed except
Yeah.
by chance.
Yeah. And actually, that reminds me, before we go any further with the book, let's...
But the Watcher's pointing out that cyclonic forces shred stuff, so
Yeah.
a larva is not likely to survive whole. So there should be falls of larva bits.
Yes, that's right. But I want to say this. This is really cool. For anyone listening, if you know of or have heard of falls of this kind, of this type, let us know by any means possible. Like a lot of people have posted on the YouTube channel.
Well, don't fax us because
Yeah, don't send us a fax.
the fax machine's broken right now.
He might be able to fax the Watcher. I think he has a fax machine in the space station. But I'm going to read a couple of these. This is from Fonk, F-O-N-K. He says, after the last stream, I was talking with family about strange rain, and an interesting story came to light. Apparently, back in the late 50s here in South L.A., my mother was visiting her uncle's dairy farm about an hour north of here when it began raining stones, pebbles, frogs, and goo, quote unquote. This was over a fairly large area encompassing 2 different farms and an old church. Naturally, the community blamed the event on that old fork-tongued so-and-so, and it seems to have been forcefully forgotten.
Wow.
They blamed it on the devil. But yes, Stones, pebbles, frogs, and goo. It rained in the 50s north of LA. That's really cool. Another one from Terry. He says, my mom saw it rain small frogs in Pittsfield in Massachusetts in 1931. I asked if she was sure it wasn't just a lot of them jumping around, but she said, looking up, she could see them falling.
Huh.
Really cool.
I didn't think, does the devil really have a forked tongue? I'm not sure about that.
Maybe he means they were blaming snakes. That's a good question. Yeah. And B. Scott says he had frogs rain out of the sky upon him and his car alone one time on a long road in southern Vermont. He said, it turns out that area is called the Bennington Triangle.
Ah.
We have heard of that area. But yeah, so if you guys have, or have family members who have talked about this kind of stuff, email us or, post a comment on the YouTubes or put it in the Discord. I love it. I'll read them on the show because this kind of stuff is interesting. Like we've been asking ourselves, and at some point while we're doing this book report, I'm going to try to do some searches for stories of more modern falls of this kind of stuff, and we'll just read them on the show. Like, okay, here's one that happened I know there was a fall of what they call blood rain in India in like 2011. It was before 2012, and everyone was like, oh my God, it's proof of the end of the world, right? And we should look that kind of stuff up.
You get your tinfoil umbrella out.
That's right. Okay, so back to the book here.
Oh, before we forget, it's the podcast birthday today.
That's right.
We forgot.
Right. We have this note telling us don't forget right in front of us.
Laura, she tells me that she'll have like a box for us or something on her desk. And I'm like, you can't, it's definitely going to get forgotten.
Yeah. Yep.
You have to actually put it on my desk and then it might not get forgotten.
Right.
So here's the note, and we almost, we're.
She came in here today before we did the show and wrote the note out and put it on the desk right in front of us. We both have seen it multiple times, and we're still almost forgetting to say that this
Happy birthday to the podcast.
That's right. This is the podcast birthday/anniversary that we have determined. It's not. If you scroll back through the feed, you'll see that that episode 2 was published much later in the year than this, but. The birth of the podcast in terms of us setting everything up and deciding we're actually going to do it and setting forth with it as a project was as close as we can determine. It was yesterday, right?
No, it's today.
It's today. Yeah. It is actually today. Okay.
Today. It just so happens to fall on a podcast day.
Okay. Wow.
February 28th.
And the watcher's right. This is year 5 of Brothers of the Serpent. So we couldn't be happier. Huh?
We're 5 years old, or this is year 5?
We're 5 years old, so
we
this
would
is
be
year
in year
6.
6.
That's
Okay,
right.
all right.
You're right. 5 years old, we're in year 6. Let's get this right.
Year 6.
Okay. So again, I'll point out this Genesis trine or Genesis trine. This is like he's sort of giving a name to a place where he is conceiving that the actual evolution of life forms that end up on this earth is actually taking place. Like that there's a source for evolution. It isn't here.
Yeah.
Which is, I find this really interesting that like that this place is, this is not where, let's see, what analogy would you make? This is not where the experiments are done. This is more like the zoo that results in completed and like working experiments, right? This is where you put them out to pasture after you've done all your work in getting them to work. You rain them onto the planet.
So why would rain consist of life forms that already have existed here for a long time?
I don't know. He talks about that too. He's like, maybe the system is old and it's not working properly anymore. It doesn't need to do this anymore, but it still is like spitting out frogs on random occasions and sometimes fish that are rotten, right? It's like clearly something's broken.
We need to collect all the types of life forms that have been said to have reigned. And just, let's be, what is the word for it? I can't remember the 2 different factions. There's the
be intermediatist or positivist.
Yeah. Let's be positivist about it and try to figure out why they're connected.
Yeah.
What can we, how otherwise can we fit these into a category?
I also
One category is that they rain,
yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
how can they also be in another category that makes them the ones that rain?
I see. That's a great yes. Okay, that's a good point. And I was
Yeah,
also,
come on, Watcher.
I was also thinking that the saying "raining cats and dogs." This is total misinformation. It will never rain cats and dogs.
Yeah, just
It will
cats.
only rain cats or dogs.
I've been thinking about that saying since we started this.
So I have an idea on how we can figure out how to find the origin. We start at 10 feet and we drop frogs. We go until they stop hitting the ground alive, and that's the height we need to start looking at.
What size?
So if it's like 700 feet, whatever it is that's doing this is 700 feet above us at all times.
I think that once you get so high, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, there's a certain, like, if they can survive terminal velocity is the question.
Yeah. And I think some frogs probably can, just because they, the way they fall, they spread their legs out and
they
sort of
spread
glide
out,
down.
sort of flying squirrel their way down.
Yeah, exactly. How high can you drop a flying squirrel?
Yeah.
They don't really fly. They just have enough air resistance to keep them from killing themselves
falling
when they
with
land.
terminal velocity that would kill them when they hit. Yeah, that's right. And they can kind of control a little bit the direction they're going.
Well, maybe there's your limiting factor. Like, the stuff that falls has to be able to withstand terminal velocity. Otherwise, it just doesn't work out.
And the machine is as he says, it's obviously a little faulty, or maybe it's just it hasn't been updated in a long time. So it's like dropping fish where there's no longer ocean.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay. So some notes I have, for it says, upon remains of men and animals encysted or covered with clay or stone, as if fired here as projectiles, I omit now, because it seems best to regard the whole phenomenon as a geotropism, probably atavistic or vestigial, as it were, or something still continuing long after the expiration of necessity. That once upon a time all kinds of things came here from Genesis stream, but that now only a few kinds of bugs and things at long intervals feel the inspiration. So there you have it. That's basically him saying this used to be the way to seed the planet, but now it's a busted system.
Right. And maybe they didn't get launched from way up high, but it was like, well, that was a mountain.
Right.
Back then.
Yeah, that's right. And he just mentions right there, see, this is where I got this, the connection that I've always had in my mind of things raining from the sky and these same things seeming to appear inside of stone. That there's something there that connects, that somehow these are connected.
Yeah, like they appear in the same way, but if there's something in the way, then they appear inside of it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So how many places around this earth are just frogs and snakes and bugs stuck in things?
Or maybe our planet's like a leaky faucet, right? They used to have it open full tilt and everything that was needed. Now it's just drip, drip, frogs and worms.
It's dripping out.
That's what all these fossils are, man. They were just
the fossils
they just appeared in the rock
and never were dug out until now. Yeah, it's
dinosaurs appeared already fighting each other.
So not one instance, says Fort, have we of tadpoles that have fallen to this earth. It seems reasonable that a whirlwind could scoop up a pond, frogs and all, and cast down the frogs somewhere else. But, then, more reasonable that a whirlwind could scoop up a pond, tadpoles and all, because tadpoles are more numerous in their season than are frogs in theirs. But the tadpole season is earlier in the spring, or in a time that is more tempestuous. Thinking in terms of causation, as if there were real causes, our notion is that, and this is really important, I like this, our notion is that if X is likely to cause Y, but is more likely to cause Z, but does not cause Z, then X is not the cause of Y. I think that's interesting. Did you get that? Should I go through it again?
It's more likely to cause Z, but it doesn't cause Z, so it's not going to cause Y.
Yeah, if X is likely to cause Y,
Yeah.
but it's more likely to cause Z, but doesn't ever cause Z, then it's probably also not the cause of Y.
Yeah, you could say probably.
Yeah. And that's
It's not absolute.
No, it's not absolute, but that's what he's saying about the tadpoles, right?
Right.
That's that basically like, okay, if whirlwinds are the reason,
yeah.
if whirlwinds are the reason for frogs raining out of the sky,
But it's more likely that
they would rain tadpoles. But
it
they'd never
doesn't
rain
rain
tadpoles.
Then it
Probably didn't rain
right,
frog. Right. Exactly.
This is great.
Okay, so upon this, we base our acceptance that the little frogs that have fallen to this earth are not products of whirlwinds, but that they came from externality or from genesistrine. I think of genesistrine in terms of biologic mechanics, not that somewhere there are persons who collect bugs in or about the last of January and frogs in July and August and then bombard this earth. Any more than do persons go through northern regions catching and collecting birds every autumn and then casting them southward. But atavistic or vestigial geotropism in genesistrine, or a million larvae start crawling and a million little frogs start hopping, knowing no more what it's all about than we do when we crawl to work in the morning and hop away at night. I should say myself that genesistrine is a region in the Super Sargasso Sea, and that parts of the Super Sargasso Sea have rhythms of susceptibility to this Earth's attraction. Chapter 8. So I accept that when there are storms, the damnedest of excluded, excommunicated things that are leprous to the faithful, are brought down from the Super Sargasso Sea, or from what for convenience we call the Super Sargasso Sea, which by no means has been taken into full acceptance yet. That things are brought down by storms, just as from the depths of the sea things are brought up by storms. To be sure, it is orthodoxy that storms have little, if any, effect below the waves of the ocean. But, of course, only to have an opinion is to be ignorant of, or to disregard a contradiction, or something else that modifies an opinion out of distinguishability. So the orthodox belief is that objects moving at planetary velocity would, upon entering this Earth's atmosphere, be virtually unaffected by hurricanes. Well, we might as well think of a bullet swerved by someone fanning himself. So now we're moving on to the idea of meteorites. Mm-hmm. Right. So is a meteorite going to be affected by a hurricane?
A little bit. Just like the fan on a bullet. Just a bit.
The only trouble with the orthodox reasoning is the usual trouble. It's phantom dominant. It's basing upon a myth, data we've had, and more we'll have, of things in the sky having no independent velocity. There are so many storms and so many meteors and meteorites that it would be extraordinary if there were no concurrences. Nevertheless, so many of these concurrences are listed by Professor Baden-Powell in the report to the British Association in 1850 that one does notice. So for other instances, there was a famous fall of stones at Siena in Italy in 1794 in a violent storm. See Gregg's catalogs. There are many instances. One that stands out is, quote, a bright ball of fire and light in a hurricane in England, September 2nd, 1786, unquote. The remarkable datum here is that this phenomenon was visible for 40 minutes. That's about 800 times the duration that the Orthodox give to meteors and meteorites. So I think he might be, in some of these cases, we're looking at something more like ball lightning than meteors. It's hard for me to tell, but when I was reading through this, he's saying, well, there was this bright ball of fire during a thunderstorm, and it was seen for a long period of time, and I'm thinking, well, that sounds more like ball lightning than meteor. Yeah. But, of course, I don't know. But I did want to bring it up. So the Annual Register, many more instances. In Nature, October 25th, 1877, and the London Times, October 15th, 1877. Something that fell in a gale of the October the 14th is described as a huge ball of green fire. This phenomenon is described by another correspondent in Nature, and an account of it by another correspondent was forwarded to Nature by W.F. Denning. There are so many instances that some of us will revolt against the insistence of the faithful that it is only coincidence. and accept that there is a connection of a kind called causal. If it is too difficult to think of stones and metallic masses swerved from their courses by storms, if they move at high velocity, we think of low velocity, or of things having no velocity at all, hovering just a few miles above this Earth, dislodged by storms, and then falling luminously. But the resistance is so great here, and coincidence so insisted upon, that we better have some more instances. An aerolite in a storm in England, September 17th, 1885. No trace of it was found. A meteorite in a gale, March 1st, 1886, described in the Monthly Weather Review in March of 1886. A meteorite in a thunderstorm off the coast of Greece, November 19th, 1899. A fall of a meteorite in a storm, July 7th, 1883, in Quebec. The same phenomenon noted in Nature. A meteorite in a whirlwind in Sweden, September 24th, 1883. A triangular cloud that appeared in a storm, December 17th, 1852. It had a red nucleus about half the apparent diameter of the moon and a long tail, and it was visible for 13 minutes, and there was an explosion of the nucleus.
Wow, that's cool.
Nevertheless, in Science Gossip, Volume 6, it is said that though meteorites have fallen in storms, no connection is supposed to exist between these two phenomena, except by the ignorant peasantry. But some of us peasants have gone through the report of the British Association in 1852, and upon page 239, Dr. Buist, who had never heard of the Super Sargasso Sea, says that though it is difficult to trace connection between the phenomena, 3 aerolites had fallen in 5 months in India during thunderstorms in 1851. For accounts by witnesses, you can see page 229 of this report. Or we are on our way to account for Thunderstones. Now, this is some really interesting stuff here. It seems to me that very strikingly here is borne out the general acceptance that ours is only an intermediate existence in which there is nothing fundamental or nothing final to take as a positive standard to judge by. Peasants believe in meteorites. Scientists excluded meteorites. Peasants believe in thunderstones. Scientists exclude thunderstones. So I don't know if you can really make that distinction, but he's right.
Yeah.
A long time before the scientific community accepted that rocks fall from the sky, people already thought that.
Right.
So it is useless to argue that peasants are out in the fields and that scientists are shut up in their laboratories and lecture rooms.
The faculty lounge.
We cannot take for a real base that, as to a phenomena with which they are more familiar, peasants are more likely to be right than our scientists. A host of biologic and meteorologic fallacies of peasants rises against us. So what he's saying there is that peasants do believe lots of stuff that probably isn't true.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true that scientists are out in the field a lot.
Yeah. I should say that our existence is like a bridge, except that comparison is in static terms. But like the Brooklyn Bridge, upon which multitudes of bugs are seeking a fundamental, coming to a girder that seems firm and final, but the girder is built upon supports. A support, then, seems final, but it is built upon underlying structures. Nothing final can be found in all of the bridge because the bridge itself is not a final thing in itself, but is merely a relationship between Manhattan and Brooklyn. If our existence is a relationship between the positive absolute and the negative absolute, then the quest for finality in it is hopeless. Everything in it must be relative, if the whole is not a whole, but is itself a relation. So the thunderstone is usually a beautifully polished, wedge-shaped piece of greenstone, says a writer in the Cornhill Magazine, volume 50. It isn't. It's likely to be almost of any kind of stone, but we call attention to the skill with which some of them have been made. Of course, this writer says it's all superstition. Otherwise, he'd be one of us crude and simple sons of the soil.
He's talking about himself? This
Yes.
writer, or the guy, is he quoting somebody?
This writer who says that they're usually beautifully polished, wedge-shaped, And that guy thinks it's all superstition that these things fall out of the sky. So the other thing I was connecting this to, and you'll see this as we go along, is that I wonder if there's any connection to the bin bin. Because the fall of what look like wedge-shaped and pyramid-shaped, beautifully crafted objects, these things seem to fall out of the sky, or at least people believe they do.
Huh.
So yeah, this writer is saying that's what they usually look like, but he doesn't believe, he thinks this is all superstition. Okay. So Fort is saying if he didn't think that, he would be one of us, crude and simple sons of the soil. Conventional damnation is that stone implements already on the ground in the first place, are found near where lightning was seen to strike. That they are supposed by astonished rustics or by intelligence of a low order to have fallen in or with lightning. So in some cases, we're talking about stone artifacts, like clearly crafted, like maybe even flint pieces, that are found where people have seen, where lightning has clearly struck the ground. And I was thinking when I'm reading, I'm like, okay, well, maybe if you just dug in that area, you'd find an artifact.
Yeah.
So and we know that there are arrowheads everywhere. So is it likely that sometimes coincidence would just happen and lightning would strike and there'd be an arrowhead dug up out of the ground by that lightning strike? I mean, that seems like it should be rare, but how rare? I don't know.
Don't know.
Okay. Throughout this book, we class a great deal of science with bad fiction. When is fiction bad or cheap or low? If coincidence is overworked, that's one way of deciding. But with single writers, coincidence seldom is overworked. We find the excess in the subject at large. Such a writer as the one of the Cornhill magazine tells us vaguely of beliefs of peasants. There is no massing of instance after instance after instance. Here, ours will be the method of mass formation. Conceivably, lightning may strike the ground where there was a wedge-shaped object there in the first place. Again and again and again. Lightning striking ground near wedge-shaped object in China. Lightning striking ground near wedge-shaped object in Scotland. Lightning striking the ground near wedge-shaped object in Central Africa. Coincidence in France. Coincidence in Java. Coincidence in South America. We grant a great deal, but note a tendency to restlessness. Nevertheless, this is the psychotropism of science to call all thunderstones said to have fallen luminously. As to greenstone, it is in the island of Jamaica, where the notion is general that axes of a hard greenstone fall out of the sky during the rains. And he lists a journal here, the Journal of something in Jamaica. Some other time we shall inquire into this localization of object of a specific material. They are of a stone nowhere else to be found in Jamaica.
That's so weird.
Yeah. All right, should we take a break?
Somebody's hurling axes during storms.
It's where thunderstones come from, man.
Yep, it's break time.
All right. And we are back, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, where we are almost always wrong, almost all of the time. I think it was like 99.8% the last analysis of incorrectness. And we are...
So I have a story to tell real quick before you go back into the book. I did experience raining ants one time.
Oh. Really?
It was down in... at the Yancey Ranch.
Oh.
And it was like these, I think they were the tree cutter or the leaf cutter ants.
Yeah.
They're big ants. They're like, a half-inch long. Now, they were winged, of course. They were flying.
Yeah, yeah.
But at some point, they just stopped flying they were just falling out of the sky and just raining down on the shop. Because I was under the shop it's got this metal roof, but it's way up there.
Yeah.
And I was just hearing it like ding, 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 ding. There's all this stuff hitting the metal roof, and I'm like, is it raining? I go out to the edge of the roof and I look down, and there's like literally just these black bugs falling out of the sky and landing on the ground. And then they were just crawling all over the place. And yeah, they had the really tiny little white wispy wings that maybe were, I guess they fall off after a while, right?
I don't know. Yeah, it's like they used them till they fell off and then they fell out of the sky.
They swarm like bees and will leave the nest and fly somewhere.
Yeah.
And I guess until the queen mates or something, and then they drop and look for start building a nest. I don't know exactly how it all works, but anyway, they were literally raining down out of the sky for quite a while right there by the shop. There's just tons of them all over the ground. So that's my one experience of raining animals.
All right. Well, that's a good one. Okay. The natives of Burma, of China, Japan, according to Blinkenberg in Thunder Weapons, page 100. Not, of course, that Blinkenberg accepts one word of this. These natives think that carved stone objects have fallen from the sky because they think they have seen such objects fall from the sky. These objects are called thunderbolts in these countries. They are called Thunderstones in Moravia and Holland, Belgium, France, Cambodia, Sumatra, and Siberia. They're called storm stones in Lausitz, sky arrows in Slavonia, thunder axes in England and Scotland, lightning stones in Spain and Portugal, sky axes in Greece.
This is crazy.
Lightning flashes in Brazil, and thunder teeth in Ambonia.
Wow, that's a very, very pervasive hoax fad.
Yes, it is. The belief is as widespread as is belief in ghosts and witches, which only the superstitious deny today. As to beliefs in North American Indians, Tyler gives a list of references. And as to South American Indians, certain stone hatchets are said to have fallen from the heavens. So if you too revolt against coincidence after coincidence after coincidence, but find our interpretation of thunderstones just a little too... Oh, I need to turn that off. Sorry. Getting notifications, which makes it where I can't read. Just a little too strong or rich for digestion. We recommend the explanation of one, Tallius, written in 1649. The naturalists say they are generated in the sky by fulgurous exhalation conglobed in a cloud by the circumfused humor. Fulgurous?
Like
fulgurite? Fulgurite? Yeah. A fulgurous exhalation conglobed in a cloud by the circumfused humor. That's the explanation that they gave in 1649. Of course, the paper in the Cornhill magazine was written with no intention of trying really to investigate this subject, but to deride the notion that worked stone objects have ever fallen from the sky. A writer in the American Journal of Science read this paper and thinks it remarkable that any man of ordinary reasoning powers should write a paper to prove that thunderbolts do not exist. Well, I confess that we are a little flattered by that. Over and over, it is scarcely necessary to suggest to the intelligent reader that thunderstones are a myth. Those last two things there are quotes from these scientists that are just like, why are you even writing a paper on this to prove that it's a myth? We all know this. It's taken for granted.
It's damned.
Yeah.
Not even going to look at it.
So Blinkenberg.
I can kind of understand that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of understand, but it takes a guy like Fort to not be that way.
Yeah.
And to collect all these different accounts.
Yeah. So Blinkenberg gives many instances of the superstition of thunderstones, which flourishes only where mentality is in a lamentable state, or universally. In Malacca, Sumatra, and Java, natives say that stone axes have often been found under trees that have been struck by lightning. Blinkenberg does not dispute this, but says it is coincidence that the axes were, of course, upon the ground in the first place, and that the natives jumped to the conclusion that these carved stones had fallen in or with lightning. In Central Africa, it is said that often have wedge-shaped, highly polished objects of stone, described as axes, been found sticking in trees that have been struck by lightning, or by what seemed to be lightning. The natives, rather like the unscientific persons of Memphis, Tennessee, when they saw snakes after a storm, jumped to the conclusion that the axes had not always been sticking in the trees. In Prussia, 2 stone axes were found in the trunks of trees, one underneath the bark. The finders, of course, jumped to the conclusion that the axes had fallen there. Another stone axe, or wedge-shaped object of worked stone, said to have been found in a tree that had been struck by lightning, or struck by something that looked like said to have been struck by something that looked like lightning. And the finder, of course, jumps to the conclusion. So this all, again, he's telling this from the perspective of Blinkenberg, who's like, this guy is reporting all these instances of thunderstones and then saying everybody is jumping to the conclusion that these things fell with the lightning or were put in there by the lightning, rather than just acknowledging that they must have been already there in every case. So then there was a cow killed by lightning, or by what looked like lightning, and the peasant who owned the cow dug up the ground at the spot and found a small green stone axe. Blinkenberg says that he jumps to the conclusion that it was this object that had fallen luminously and killed the cow. Muner tells of another thunderstone that was said to have fallen in North Africa. This is probably Meunier. He's a French guy. Yeah, Meunier, too, is a little lamentable here. He quotes a soldier of experience that such objects fall most frequently in the deserts of Africa. And then there was a thunderstone said to have fallen in London in April of 1876. It weighed about 8 pounds. No particulars as to shape. And there was a thunderstone said to have fallen at Cardiff, September 26, 1916. This was reported in the London Times. According to Nature, it was a coincidence. Only a lightning flash had been seen. Then there was a stone that fell in a storm near St. Albans in England, accepted by the Museum of St. Albans, said at the British Museum not to be of true meteoritic material. That in April 20th, 1876, near Wolverhampton, fell a mass of meteoric iron during a heavy fall of rain. An account of this phenomenon in Nature accepts it as authentic. But then there was a wedge shape, as to wedge shape larger than could very well be called an axe. There was, in May 27th, 1884, in Norway, a meteorite, that the turf was torn up at the spot where this object had been supposed to have fallen. And 2 days later, a very peculiar stone was found nearby. The description is, in shape and size, very like the fourth part of a large Stilton cheese.
All right, so I just had this idea that where do you find clean stones on the ground, like that are not surrounded by dust and dirt?
After a rainstorm, right? Is that what she's getting at?
No, I'm thinking in a river.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of the same idea, right? That the water's washing all the dust away. So this doesn't happen in space, right? So if you go to a desert and you find a rock, it's most likely going to be surrounded by trillions of really tiny rocks.
Yeah.
You know, the dust and the dirt that's around it.
Yeah.
So in space, where there are no rivers of water washing stones, any small stone that's floating around there is probably surrounded by all of the natural dust and dirt that is probably part of that rock, because that rock has an origin. Like, it probably came from something bigger that was hit, tumbled in a way, right? Broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. And in every one of those breaks, tiny flecks of dust and dirt and sand also break out. So that you can imagine, like, every stone that's large enough to come down and hit the earth is probably surrounded by clouds of dust and dirt that are going roughly in the same trajectory and speed as that stone. So that you could say that it's very likely that before that stone enters the atmosphere, a bunch of dust particles and dirt particles enter the atmosphere, and that causes it to start raining somewhere because they act as like a nucleus,
a nucleation
site for the water vapor. So you end up with this rainstorm, and then a
big chunk,
comes down and hits the ground.
Yeah.
So
and they fall luminously, but it seems like.
And of course, the dust would create static, and there'd be lightning involved and all that.
I have a hard time telling from these reports whether the scientists are deciding it was lightning, because the people who are actually the witnesses usually say something fell luminously.
Yeah.
And then the scientists are like, well, it was a lightning strike. Right, it was just mistaken as a meteorite, and the rock that was found on the ground in that spot is like just coincidence.
Yeah, I was just having this sort of epiphany that like you shouldn't find it. It should be very rare to find anywhere in space a stone
all by itself
that's clean in terms of, because if you just took all that space around the stone and put it in a gravity well where everything laid out on a surface, you should see the same situation you see anywhere on the earth where you find stones. They're surrounded by much smaller stones all the way down to dust.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
The only time you don't find that is in a river basin or something where it's all been washed away and only left certain size stones, and they're all clean.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking.
Right. Yeah. So on Earth, in a gravity well, what you see is the action of gravity and water and stuff that's sort of breaking that rock down, and you'll see the patterns of that in where the little bits are.
Right.
In space, it may be some other mechanisms, because that's not I mean, it is gravity, I guess, but there's
gravity.
So it might be a
impacts.
stream, like a stream more. But yeah, it's going to be any large rock in space is going to be surrounded by smaller bits of itself.
You just can't. Yeah, it's kind of. I guess what I'm getting at is it's. Thinking of it that way, it's hard to imagine that there's any clean rock in space. In other words, the space around it for probably thousands of miles, cubic miles, is probably cluttered with other bits and debris that were part of that rock's breakdown into the size that it is.
Right.
Because it didn't start out as like a jagged chunk of rock.
Yeah. Okay. It is interesting how many of these are said to be wedge-shaped or axes, though. I find that interesting.
Hey, man, space is napping.
Yeah. Space napped rocks. So it is our acceptance that many objects and different substances have been brought down by atmospheric disturbance from what, only as a matter of convenience now, and until we have more data, we will call the Super Sargasso Sea. However, our chief interest is in objects that have been shaped by means similar to human handicraft. Description of the Thunderstones of Burma. These are said to have been of a kind of stone unlike any other found in Burma, called thunderbolts by the natives. I think there's a good deal of meaning in such expressions as unlike any other found in Burma, but that if they had said anything more definite, there would have been unpleasant consequences to writers in the 19th century. So more about these Thunderstones of Burma. One of them, described as an adze, is that how you say that? A-D-Z-E? That's a kind of tool.
I have no idea.
It was exhibited by Captain Duff, who wrote that there was no stone like it in its neighborhood. Of course, it may not be very convincing to say that because adze?
Says the Watcher.
Okay. Thanks, Watcher. Of course, it may not be very convincing to say that because a stone is unlike neighboring stones, it has foreign origin. Also, we fear it is a kind of plagiarism. We got it from the geologists who demonstrate by this reasoning that the foreign origin of erratics. So we fear we're a little gross and scientific at times. We're being grossly scientific. But it is my acceptance that a great deal of scientific literature must be read between the lines. It's not everyone who has the lamentableness of a Sir John Evans. Just as a great deal of Voltaire's meaning was interlinear, we suspect that a Captain Duff merely hints, rather than to risk having a Professor Lawrence Smith fly at him and call him a half-insane man. Whatever Captain Duff's meaning may have been, and whether he smiled like Voltaire when he wrote it, Captain Duff writes of the extremely soft nature of the stone, rendering it equally useless as an offensive or defensive weapon. Story by a correspondent in Nature of a Malay of considerable social standing. And one thing about our data is that, damned though they may be, they do so often bring us into awfully good company, who knew of a tree that had been struck about a month before by something in a thunderstorm. He searched among the roots of this tree and found a thunderstone. Not said whether he jumped or leaped to the conclusion that it had fallen. Process likely to be more leisurely in tropical countries than jumping or leaping. Just sort of strolled over to it. Also, I'm afraid his way of reasoning was not very original. Just so were fragments of the Bath Furnace meteorite accepted by orthodoxy discovered.
So he found pieces of a meteorite and he found an artifact.
Yeah.
What do you think about this stuff? Like, you think, because I mean, they're not describing the pieces. If they described them like that they were like ground axes,
Yeah.
like the ones
I know. I was looking for that too.
the granite axes that are ground, they're all smooth. They're always a particular shape, or then an axe that's like a chipped stone axe by.
Well,
flaking.
what strikes me is a lot of times it's the natives, quote unquote, indigenous / natives, the people who are the closest to making those kinds of tools, who are identifying them as being that kind of tool, and also have fallen from the sky. So I don't know what to think of that.
I wonder if it's just this crazy thought, but that fulgurites might have been a material that could have been made into artifacts, or is it because it's like a shock type of.
It's
quartz,
fused. It's fused glass. Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually.
So it would make it might make a good artifact.
Yes, a chippable artifact. Yes.
So technically, you could say that there's like almost like a quant stuff here, where it was like ancient people used to dig up fulgurites that were the thunderstones, and they would make axes and artifacts out of them.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I was like, just with the whole. The problem is when they find them stuck in trees. Like, we'll get into that. You can't say, well, they just dug that out of the ground. It's stuck in the dang tree. Now you could say, well, I guess every once in a while one would end up in a tree, and then that tree would get struck by lightning,
and then it would split along wherever the axe was stuck.
And then somebody would pull it out of the tree. I guess. Okay. So we shall now have an unusual experience. We shall read of some reports of extraordinary circumstances that were investigated by a man of science. Not, of course, that they were really investigated by him, but that his phenomena occupied a position approximating higher to real investigation than to utter neglect. Over and over, we read of extraordinary occurrences, and no discussion, not even a comment afterward findable, mere mention occasionally, and then burial and damnation. This is the extraordinary and how quickly it is hidden away. But we now have a good many reported occurrences that were investigated. Of things said to have fallen from the sky, we make, in the usual scientific way, two divisions: miscellaneous objects and substances, and symmetric objects attributable to beings like human beings, subdividing into wedges, spheres, and disks. July 2nd, 1866, a correspondent to a London newspaper wrote that something had fallen from the sky during a thunderstorm of June 30th, 1866, at Notting Hill. Mr. G.T. Simmons of Simmons Meteorological Magazine investigated about as fairly and with about as unprejudiced a mind as anything ever has been investigated. He says that the object was nothing but a lump of coal, and that next door to the home of this correspondent, coal had been unloaded the day before. With the uncanny wisdom of the stranger upon unfamiliar ground that we have noted before, Mr. Simmons saw that the coal reported to have fallen from the sky and the coal unloaded more prosaically the day before were identical. Persons in the neighborhood, unable to make this simple identification, had bought from the correspondent pieces of the objects reported to have fallen from the sky. As to credulity, I know of no limits for it, but when it comes to paying out money for credulity, there are no standards to judge by, of course, just the same. The trouble with efficiency is that it will merge away into excess with what seems to me to be superabundance of convincingness. Mr. Simmons then lugs another character into this little comedy. It was all a hoax by a chemist's pupil who had filled a capsule with an explosive and during the storm had thrown the burning mass into the gutter, making an artificial thunderbolt. So this is now we're in the hoax thing, right? So it does get suspicious when you're like, okay, wait, this guy was selling pieces of sky coal to his neighbors. That's weird. That's when you can start to think like, all right, this does seem like a con, but I guess what Ford is asking is like, who's buying the sky coal? So whether I'm lugging in something that has no special meaning myself or not, I find that this storm of June 30th was peculiar. It is described in the London Times, July 2nd, 1866, that during the storm, the sky in many places remained partially clear, while hail and rain were falling. So that may have more meaning when we take up the possible extra-mundane origin of some hailstones, especially if they fall from a cloudless sky. According to the Kilburn Times, July 7th, 1877, quoted by Mr. Simmons, a street had been literally strewn during the storm with a mass of clinkers, estimated at about 2 bushels, sizes from that of a walnut to that of a man's hand. So I looked this up, clinkers. I think it basically means unsatisfactory or like pieces of coal in this case that are like no good, so people just toss them out. So they were estimated about 2 bushels worth of these things, sizes from a walnut to that of a man's hand, and that pieces of these clinkers can be seen at the Kilburn Times office. If these clinkers or cinders were refuse from one of the super mercantile constructions from which coke and coal and ashes do occasionally fall to this earth, or rather to the super Sargasso Sea, from which dislodgement by tempests occurs, it is intermediatistic to accept that they must merge away somewhere with local phenomena of the scene of precipitation. Mr. Simmons learned that in the same street, and he emphasizes that it is a short street, there was a fire engine station. I had such an impression of him hustling and bustling around at Notting Hill, searching cellars until he found one with newly arrived coal in it, ringing doorbells, exciting a whole neighborhood, calling up to second-story windows, stopping people in the streets, hotter and hotter on the trail of a wretched imposter of a chemist's pupil. After his efficiency at Notting Hill, we'd expect to hear that he went to the station and something like this. It is said that clinkers fell in your street at about 10 minutes past 4 o'clock, afternoon of July 5th. Will you look over your records and tell me where your engine was at about 10 minutes past 4 on July 5th? And Mr. Simmons says, I think that most probably they had been raked out of the steam fire engine. So that's his conclusion. He finds that there's a fire engine station near or on the same street where these things were found all over the ground, and he thinks that they were just raked out of the fire engine. And everybody decided that they had fallen in the rainstorm for some reason. But this is, this again goes to like I guess the question you would want to ask on the other side of this equation, not to argue for them falling out of the sky, but to say these people have been living next to the fire station. And if they rake the coals out of the fire engine onto the street on a regular basis, or at least,
that nobody would think twice about it.
Yeah, that they're not going to be like, wow, these fell out of the sky.
Yeah.
I kind of think this is what Fort is trying to get at here in his like really roundabout way with his whole thing about, here comes the stranger to answer all the questions that the local people just completely miss, right?
Yeah.
That, wow, this is a mushroom that just grew in your yard. Didn't fall out of the sky. This is actually a fungus.
Yeah.
And you just have never noticed that funguses do appear after rain in this place you've lived your entire life.
Yeah.
That isn't an argument for them raining out of the sky. I'm just saying that it is a good question as to like why in this particular instance did everyone decide that this coal must have fallen with the rainstorm.
Yeah, and going back to the idea that rain can be caused by seeding the clouds, as the Watcher had pointed out.
Yeah.
That the clouds could be seeded by falls from space, of dust from space, and that dust can also have other stuff in it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So then we have the instance of 3 lumps of earthy material found upon a well-frequented path after a thunderstorm at Reading, July 3rd, 1883. There are so many records of the fall of earthy matter from the sky that it would seem almost uncanny to find resistance here, were we not so accustomed to the uncompromising stands of orthodoxy, which, in our metaphysics, represent good as attempts, but evil in their insufficiency.
It's also weird, I'm just breaking in here, that, there's this idea that, the things that fall from the sky are usually only these things.
Yeah.
Everything else comes from Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, where did Earth come from?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the whole freaking thing came from the sky.
It actually is in the sky.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like,
That's a great point. Yeah.
No.
Did you know that the Earth actually is flying around in the sky?
But also, it came from the sky.
That's
All
right.
of the stuff that's here fell
That's right. Yeah.
from the sky.
That's a good point. If I thought it necessary, I'd list 150 instances of earthy matter said to have fallen from the sky. It is his antagonism to atmospheric disturbance associated with the fall of things from the sky that blinds and hypnotizes Mr. Simmons here. So I've skipped some of this, but I just want to make clear that what Ford is doing through this entire section is he's saying, okay, so this guy, Mr. Simmons, who is the owner and editor of Simmons Meteorological Magazine. In other words, the dude is fascinated with meteorology, okay, in this time period. And he's taken it upon himself to travel around and investigate actual strange things falling from the sky. So Fort's giving him credit for that. He's like, look, out of all of the reports that I've seen across all of these, over 100 years of stuff in all these journals, this guy's the only one who actually makes an attempt.
Right, to go investigate him.
Right. Now, he does it in the classic, orthodox, dismissive way, but at least he's making an attempt.
Yeah, he's probably one of those people that's like, I'm going to go answer the questions.
That's
right.
right,
Like, he gets this thrill from like solving the mystery. Right?
Yeah.
It's like
So Ford is like kind of on his side at the same time as saying, but look at how he goes about it. He shows up with a bias of this was already on the ground, basically, But he's at the same time giving him credit for even trying to look into some of this stuff, taking them seriously enough to I'm going to travel around and do this, So first we have the chemist's pupil playing a prank with an explosive. And then we have the fire engine, raking the coals out. But what we're doing here, and I'm skipping a lot of it, but is just Simmons investigating.
I can totally relate to this guy. It's like, I want to show up and like look at the situation and see if I can come up with a mundane explanation.
Yeah.
Because what you hope for really is that you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we would hope
Yeah,
for.
well, that's what I would, but you need to exhaust all possibilities first.
Yeah. So that's what he's talking about here. He says, it is his antagonism to atmospheric disturbance associated with the fall of things from the sky that blinds and hypnotizes Mr. Simmons here. This especial Mr. Simmons rejects the reading substance because it was not of true meteoritic material. That's his...
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It's uncanny, or it's not uncanny at all, but universal. If you don't take something for a standard of opinion, you can't have any opinion at all. But if you do take a standard, in some of its applications, it must be preposterous. The carbonaceous meteorites, which are unquestioned though avoided, as we have seen by orthodoxy, are more glaringly of untrue meteoritic material than was this substance at Reading. Mr. Simmons says that these 3 lumps were upon the ground in the first place. What time we got?
It's time for a break.
Okay.
Boy.
All right.
We'll be right back. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment of the show. Part 5 of the Book of the Damned. And yeah, this is...
He says reading is pronounced Reading. Is that right? Reading, England.
Oh.
All right. I should have known.
Yeah.
It's Boff and Reading. All right, let's see if we can finish this without Watcher falling asleep.
Very fun.
So yeah, I want to reiterate this thing he said about carbonaceous meteorites at the end of the last segment there. He says, these carbonaceous meteorites, which are unquestioned but avoided, as we have seen by orthodoxy, are more glaringly of untrue meteoritic material than was this substance of Reading. So Mr. Simmons says that these lumps were on the ground in the first place.
He's saying that the carbonaceous stuff is less unlikely. Is that what he's trying to say?
What he's saying is that what they mean by true meteoritic material is like the metal.
Right.
The carbonaceous meteorites, which at the time that Fort was writing were a known phenomenon, but had not really been accepted as meteorites yet. It was a known thing. But, we're moving we're still in the period of like moving towards accepting things fall from the sky. Whereas before this, Fort was pointing out that there had been scientists proving that no rocks ever fell from the sky.
Right.
At this point where we are with Fort, they've accepted the metallic meteorites. But the stony ones, the carbonaceous chondrites that they're called now, which are accepted now, at Fort's time were still in the process of being accepted,
debate.
and they were kind of avoided. So when Mr. Simmons says that these 3 lumps at Reading were not of true meteoritic material, what he means is they're not metal.
Right. Yeah.
So whether these data are worth preserving or not, I think that the appeal that this special Mr. Simmons makes is worthy of a place in the museum that we're writing. He argues against belief in all external origins for our credit as Englishmen. He is a patriot, but I think that these foreigners had a small chance in the first place for hospitality from him. Then comes a small lump of iron, 2 inches in diameter, which was said to have fallen during a thunderstorm at Brixton, August 17th, 1887. Mr. Simmons says, at present, I cannot trace it. In the London Times, February 1st, 1888, it is said that a roundish object of iron had been found after a violent thunderstorm in a garden at Brixton. It was analyzed by a chemist who could not identify it as a true meteorite. Whether a product of workmanship like human workmanship or not, this object is described as an oblate spheroid about 2 inches across its major diameter.
Could be a tektite, maybe?
Yeah. Now we have an iron cannonball, quote unquote. It was found in a manure heap in Sussex after a thunderstorm. However, Mr. Simmons argues pretty reasonably, it seems to me, that given a cannonball in a manure heap in the first place, lightning may be attracted by it. And if seen to strike there, the untutored mind or mentality below the average might leap or jump or proceed with less celerity to the conclusion that the iron object had fallen with the lightning. Except that, if every farmer isn't upon very familiar ground, or if every farmer doesn't know his own manure heap, as well as Mr. Simmons knows his writing desk. So his implication there is like, does the farmer not know there's a cannonball in his manure heap because he put it there? Then comes the instance of a man, his wife, and his 3 daughters at Casterton, Westmoreland. That's probably not, I'm probably butchering both of those, who were out looking at their lawn during a thunderstorm when they considered, as Mr. Simmons expresses it, that they saw a stone fall from the sky, kill a sheep, and bury itself into the ground. And they dug, and they found a stone ball. Simmons says this is a coincidence. It had been there in the first place.
Oh, man.
This object was exhibited at a meeting of the Royal Meteorological Society by Mr. C. Carus Wilson. It is described in the journal's list of exhibits as a sandstone ball. It is described as sandstone by Mr. Simmons. Now, a round piece of sandstone maybe almost anywhere in the ground in the first place. But by our more or less discreditable habit of prying and snooping, we find that this object was rather more complex and of material less commonplace. In Snooping Through Knowledge, October 9th, 1855, we read that this thunderstone was in the possession of Mr. C. Carus Wilson, who tells the story of the witness and his family, the sheep killed, the burial of something in the earth, the digging, and the finding. Mr. C. Carus Wilson describes the object as a ball of hard, ferruginous quartzite, about the size of a coconut.
Whoa.
Where did they get the coconut?
Wow.
Weight, about 12 pounds. Whether we're feeling around for significance or not, there is a suggestion not only of symmetry but of structure in this object. It had an external shell separate from some loose nucleus. Mr. Carus Wilson attributes this cleavage to unequal cooling of the mass. So you see what happens here. It's interesting. Mr. Simmons can't find this object, right? But he makes a determination based on...
He can't find...
He doesn't actually get
material.
to examine the object itself.
Okay.
But he makes a determination based on the description of it in the journal as a sandstone ball. But when Fort digs around more, does more what he calls prying and snooping, and finds a much better description of it by the person who was exhibiting the thing in the first place as ferruginous quartzite, size of a coconut, weight 12 pounds, so on and so forth, it becomes more clear that this is not a common piece of sandstone that you might find lying on the ground anywhere. Right. So my own notion, Fort says, is that there is very little deliberate misrepresentation in the writings of scientific men, that they are quite as guiltless in intent as are other hypnotic subjects. Such a victim of induced belief reads of a stone ball said to have fallen from the sky. Mechanically, in his mind, arise impressions of globular lumps or nodules of sandstone, which are common almost everywhere. So he assimilates the reported fall with his impressions of objects in the ground that are there in the first place. Mm-hmm. So here he's giving them a pass. He's saying they're not being deliberately misleading. That there is very little
worst type of misleading.
So the next instance was reported by W.B. Tripp, that during a thunderstorm, a farmer had seen the ground in front of him plowed up by something that was luminous, and he dug and found a bronze axe. My own notion, for it says, is that an expedition to the North Pole could not be so urgent as that representative scientist should have gone to that farmer and there spent a summer studying this one reported occurrence. As it is, unnamed farmer, somewhere, no date, this thing stays damned. I'm not sure, not positively, of course, that we've tried to be as easygoing and lenient with Mr. Simmons as his obviously scientific performance would permit. Of course, it may be that subconsciously we were prejudiced against him, instinctively classing him with St. Augustine, Darwin, St. Jerome, and Lyell. As to the Thunderstones, I think that he investigated them mostly for the credit of Englishmen, or in the spirit of the Royal Krakatoa Committee, or about as the commission from the French Academy investigated meteorites, the people who were proving it, that they didn't fall. Mm-hmm. According to a writer in Knowledge, the Krakatoa Committee attempted not in the least to prove what had caused the atmospheric effects of 1883, but to prove that Krakatoa did it. And I like the difference there. So he's saying that what Simmons was doing was similar. He wasn't going out to find out what's happening. He was going out to prove that it wasn't happening the way people were saying it was happening.
Right.
In opening his paper, Mr. Simmons says that he undertook his investigation as to the existence of thunderstones, or thunderbolts, as he calls them, quote, feeling certain that there was a weak point somewhere, inasmuch as thunderstones and thunderbolts have no existence, unquote.
Right.
We have another instance of the reported fall of a cannonball. It occurred prior to Mr. Simmons' investigations, but it is not mentioned by him. It was investigated, however, in the Proceedings of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. It is the report of a thunderstone supposed to have fallen in Hampshire, September 1852. It was an iron cannonball, or it was a large nodule of iron pyrites, or bisulfurate of iron. No one had seen it fall, but it had been noticed upon a garden path for the first time after a thunderstorm. It was only a supposed thing because it had not the character of any known meteorite. Upon a garden path. So that again is like, do people know what's on their garden path or not?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, is a cannonball going to be dug up out of the ground and rolled onto a garden path by a thunderstorm? I guess. I mean, people find cannonballs all over Europe, right? They've been fighting with cannons there they had fought with cannons there in many places. So finding an unexploded or just a random cannonball is not, it's rare, but it happens.
Yeah.
But just, you know, you got a big thunderstorm and then you go out to look at your garden afterwards and there's just a cannonball sitting on the path is a little strange.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Watcher's got a joke. What's your joke, Watcher?
Why can't he just write it down?
I don't know. He doesn't want to spill the beans.
I was trying to write it down, but it was taking way too long.
Oh, no. You didn't say you had a way too long
you didn't
joke.
say you had an extremely long joke.
Dude, it's not extremely long. It's just typing. All right, so the cannonball that was found was mixed iron pyrites.
Yeah. Well,
So what type of cannonball do you fire if you're flying the Jolly Roger?
Iron
fool's gold
pirates. Yeah,
cannonball.
fool's gold. Iron pirates. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This reminds me, though, of there is a story, I think, I can't remember if we
And
did
of course, they found it on a path.
a path. That's right. They tried to give it to the scientists, but
He's already got one, you see?
so this reminds me of the story of there's like a story. I can't remember if it was in the UFO episodes or whatever. I think it was, of this giant ball that like fell in the middle of the farmer's field and like buried itself in the ground,
yeah.
like 13 feet or something. And they dug it up and it was this big iron ball.
Yeah.
And they kept it, and then it would like sometimes move on its own or roll around. And
what was that? That was a weird report. Yeah.
they kept they kept it in their family for a long time, and it
Yeah.
was studied by all these people. It's like, yeah.
That's right. What was that thing?
So the other thing I want to know is, you know, we talk about impact structure. Well, when an object hits the ground, it buries itself in the ground like a big enough one, and it explodes, and that's what makes the normal, like the way we think of craters, these big round things it's because it's a bomb underground goes off.
Yeah. Those are things that.
A crater like a mine, like a landmine would leave.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's blowing all the earth out of there. But something that embeds itself in the ground but doesn't explode. What kind of...
The Betz Sphere. That's what it was. Thanks, Watcher. That's the name of that.
Bedford Sphere. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, that was an interesting story. I mean, that would fit right in with all this stuff.
So what was...
So I'm wanting to know, just thinking about this, like if something comes down from the sky, kills a sheep, and then embeds itself in the ground, is it going to leave a crater, or is it just going to be a hole that maybe partially collapses? And, you know, I mean, it just depends on what the ground is, but I'm thinking about maybe some, like sandy loam or clay or something that it...
Yeah, so like the bronze axe story, right? The guy is out there, he sees what he thinks is a lightning bolt or something falling luminously, and then it plows the ground up in front of him. Yeah. Then he digs into the ground and finds a bronze axe. Now, was that axe the thing
did he not
caused...
make it? Yeah, did he not make it to the actual object that
Right.
fell? He found the bronze axe and he's like, oh my gosh,
this thing made the...
Because for me, if I started digging, let's say I'm out farming.
Yeah.
The farm is not on the top of a hill far away from water.
Right.
Most likely the farm is in a river basin.
Yeah.
So you're going to find artifacts there.
Yeah.
So I'm farming and I see an object come and kill one of our sheep, and after a little like celebration dance for one less sheep. No, I'm just kidding, folks. I don't want the sheep to die.
We just don't want the sheep.
We just don't want the sheep. I just dig down and I find a giant arrowhead.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not going to be like,
I'm
wow.
like, holy crap! No. First, I'm gonna I'm gonna dig more here, but for now I'm gonna keep going
because
down.
I know I haven't found the thing that fell from the sky yet.
Yeah.
But what if it is the thing that fell from the sky?
Well, I mean, is the thing that I find that's what I'm asking about the crater structure.
I agree with the keep. Well, that's the thing, is
because
they're not falling at meteoric speeds.
Okay, so
clearly these objects.
So then I'm digging like 2 inches down. I mean, how deep is this thing going to embed itself?
They're not. Well, they're not falling at the speeds of something that hasn't been slowed down a lot by the atmosphere.
Right.
Right. And the smaller they are, the more they will get slowed down.
So let's go back to if an object falls from space.
Yeah.
And is or let's say it's an ejecta from an explosion, or it's a tektite or something, and it hits the ground and it buries itself.
Yeah.
Is it going to leave like it's going to leave like some type of crater structure.
Yeah.
And I can kind of follow that and dig in the middle.
Yeah.
And go and keep going. And I'm not going to run into some big stone that's not it.
Right.
Unless I'm not digging in the right place.
Yeah.
Because that thing would have shattered that stone.
Right.
Or that axe head or whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess the idea that I'm getting at is it should have been clear. Like the path that this thing took through the soil, because it would have been broken up.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. This is one of those things where you're like, need more details.
Yeah.
You know, how much did the guy dig before he found that bronze axe?
Yeah.
Was it still warm?
I don't know.
I mean, it is one thing to say, you know,
what drives a man to dig? I mean, just the idea that this person would go and dig. Of course, they don't tell you how far.
Yeah.
But like a farmer is like, well, I'm going to go dig there.
Yeah.
Because something fell from the sky and plowed up the dirt
and killed my sheep.
And killed my sheep.
Yeah.
So he's going to dig to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then he's probably used to finding stone artifacts in his farm.
Yeah.
So finding this, or I don't know if it was a bronze axe in this case. Was that the one?
That was the bronze axe. Yeah.
The bronze axe was the one where he saw the ground plowed up in front of him.
Yeah, and that one, the one that killed the sheep. Am I getting those mixed up?
I don't think so. No, the sheep one was a. I thought that was like a stone ball, or maybe it was. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. There's no sheep in that story. During his thunderstorm, a farmer had seen the ground in front of him plowed up by something that was luminous, and he dug and found a bronze axe. You're right. No sheep killed that one.
So maybe a lightning strike happened because there's a bronze axe down there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just interested in the idea that, or what does it look like when an object falls from space? So an actual meteorite that doesn't blow up when it embeds itself in the ground.
Yeah. Well, I think that is like that's a matter of kinetic energy, right? That is being released in a different way. The explosion is the kinetic energy, right? You like this object buries itself in the ground, and the kinetic energy is being transferred from the object to the ground so quickly that you end up with this enormous explosion because it builds up like a shock wave in front of it, which is it's already done in the atmosphere. But that usually happens with objects that are coming in at what are considered more like meteoric speeds. You know, they're coming in at 10,000 or more miles per hour or whatever.
When they actually explode in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But something can come, you know, like a bullet is going at faster than terminal velocity, like way faster than if you dropped it when you fire it from a gun, and it will hit something and it'll make an impact, and if you shoot it into the ground, it'll plow into the ground.
Yeah.
It won't necessarily make a crater unless you're shooting it into sand. Maybe it'll make a crater. But if you shoot it into sand, are you going to be able to follow the path of the bullet to find it in the
well,
sand.
they shred. I mean, you're not shooting an iron ball either. You're
Right.
shooting some lead, and
Yeah.
it just shreds itself.
Well, if you shoot a, you know, like one that isn't
you can
lead.
shoot lead into some soft
Yeah.
dirt, and you can find it whole.
Yeah, right.
And
it
yeah, it leaves a little kind of a crater structure or
yeah,
something.
Yeah.
It just seems, if it was something big, like the size of a coconut,
Yeah.
then you should be able to follow the path to it
Yes.
that it makes in the ground.
Yeah. So yeah, the sheep one was a man, his wife, and 3 daughters looking out over their lawn during a thunderstorm when they saw a stone fall from the sky, kill a sheep, and bury itself in the ground, and they dug and find a stone ball. And this is the one that turns out to be
The sandstone.
a
or the-
hard ferruginous quartzite,
Yeah.
size of a coconut, weight 12 pounds.
That seems totally believable to me. I mean, this is like, I
Yeah.
can totally buy that.
Right.
But the bronze axe or whatever,
It's harder
no.
to believe.
I'm just,
You're just like, that one was already there.
I'm not
The guy
buying
didn't
that.
dig far enough.
That's right. He got tired, or he just got excited about this axe and
Yeah.
just stopped digging.
Right.
And I mean, I could totally see how his story would be like, I saw this thing fall and I started digging there and then I found a bronze axe.
Yeah, you don't
And how-
necessarily have to connect.
Somebody else is like, a bronze axe fell from the sky.
Right. And I think Ford is saying that too. He's like, there should have been a scientific expedition to this guy's property.
Yeah,
And they should have dug up the ground.
That's right.
To find the object, right? This dude found a bronze axe and quit.
Yeah. That's where I'm going with it.
Yeah. And I mean, if they dug up and found nothing, then you would have to start wondering, like, was it the bronze axe? You know?
That's right. They dug up the whole area, sifted the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was nothing.
Then
there
you would
be
want to
found.
test this axe for isotopes that are not of this earth.
Okay, so the aliens come down, they pick up some people in the Bronze Age,
Yeah. That's right.
and
They would be archaeologists.
you know, one guy that they picked up hid an axe on himself. And when they got way up there, they were like, put that in the discharge container. And they chucked it out into space. And one day
It comes back
it
down.
fell back down.
That's right.
So I'm still on the camp of up and then down again.
Up one place and down in another. Yeah. Okay. I mean, hey, has there ever been a guy who was carrying a bronze axe that was near a volcanic explosion?
Hey, he could have been a pirate.
Oh, yeah.
And then the volcano exploded under the ocean and threw him up into the mesosphere.
Okay. Okay. Where was I? Mr. Simmons, Cannonball. Okay, yeah. At the meeting of the Institute of December 1st, 1888, one of the members, Mr. J.A. Livingstone, exhibited a globular quartz body, which he had asserted had fallen from the sky. It had been split open and it was hollow. But the other members of the Institute decided that the object was spurious, because it was not of true meteoritic material. No date, no place mentioned. We note the suggestion that it was only a geode, which had been upon the ground in the first place. Its crystalline lining was geode-like. So in bibliography, part 2, page 355, up and down, of course, another object of quartzite was reported to have fallen in the autumn of 1880 at Shroon Lake, New York. Said in the Scientific American to be a fraud. It was not. This is the usual. About the 1st of May, 1899, the newspapers published a story of a Snow White meteorite that had fallen in Indiana. The editor of the Monthly Weather Review requested the local Observer to investigate. The editor says that the thing was only a fragment of a quartz boulder. He says that anyone with at least a public school education should know better than to write that quartz has ever fallen from the sky.
Is that what they teach you at that grade level?
in this time, in 1899, were they teaching that quartz does not fall from the sky? In the Leiden Museum of Antiquities, there is a disc of quartz, 6 centimeters by 5 millimeters by about 5 centimeters, which was said to have fallen upon a plantation in the Dutch West Indies after a meteoric explosion. So they see a bolide explosion, and then a disc of quartz lands, and they're wondering if it's connected. Then there's an object that fell at Richland in South Carolina. It was yellowish and to gray, said to look like a piece of brick. Pieces of furnace-made brick said to have fallen in a hailstorm in August 1834. The writer offers an explanation that started another convention, that fragments of brick had been knocked from buildings by the hailstones. But there is here a concomitant that will be disagreeable to anyone who may have been inclined to smile at the now digestible enough notion that furnace-made bricks have fallen from the sky. It is that in some of the hailstones, about 2% of them, that were found with the pieces of brick, there was a light grayish powder. So in the hailstones, pieces of brick fall in a hailstorm. And in some of the hailstones, they found light grayish powder, which matches the material of the bricks said to have fallen from the sky.
Yeah, brick dust is cosmic brick dust. And chunks of cooked clay are flying around in space.
Yeah.
And they seed the rain clouds and hailstones fall.
Yes, I agree with that. That had been reported that a good-sized stone of a form that was clearly artificial had fallen at Naples, November 1885. So what he means, this is what he says when he says it's artificial. Not that the stone was made, but that it was like worked.
Yeah.
The stone was described by 2 professors of Naples who had accepted it as inexplicable but veritable. They were visited by Dr. H. Johnstone. So first we have Livingstone, and now we have Johnston, the correspondent to Nature, whose investigations had convinced him that the object was a shoemaker's lapstone. This object of work stone, or this shoemaker's lapstone, was made of Vesuvian lava, Dr. Johnston thinks. Most probably of lava of the flow of 1631 from the La Scala quarries. We condemn most probably as bad positivism. As to the men of position who had accepted that this thing had fallen from the sky, I have now obliged them to admit their mistake, says Dr. Johnston. Or it's always the stranger in Naples who knows La Scala, lava, better than the natives know it. Explanation, the thing had been knocked from or thrown from a roof. As to attempt to trace the occurrence to any special roof, nothing is said upon that subject.
A shoemaker liked to make shoes on the roof.
On the roof, right.
Or he quit his job as a shoemaker. And he tossed his shoemaking stone up on the roof.
It is so easy to say that axes or wedge-shaped stones found on the ground were there in the first place, Kyle. And that it is only coincidence that lightning should strike near one. But the credibility of coincidences decreases as the square root of their volume, I think. Our massed instances speak too much of coincidences, but the axes or wedge-shaped objects that have been found in trees are more difficult for orthodoxy. For instance, Arago accepts that such finds have occurred, but he argues that if wedge-shaped stones have been found in tree trunks, so have toads been found in tree trunks. Did those toads fall there? This is great. He's admitting that toads have been found in tree trunks.
Well, yeah, but all right.
But they didn't fall there.
But I mean, were they in a pocket surrounded by a live tree? Or was it in a dead hollow of a tree?
Oh, yeah. I guess maybe that is the point he's making. Because I immediately think of like the frogs found embedded in a tree.
In a perfect frog-shaped hole.
That's right. Dr. Botting argues with the natives of the Santal Parganas in India, who said that cut and shaped stones had fallen from the sky, and some of them lodged in tree trunks. Dr. Botting, who's with orthodox notions of velocity of falling bodies, having missed, I suppose, some of the notes I have on large hailstones, which for size have fallen with astonishingly low velocity, he argued that anything falling from the sky would be smashed to atoms. He accepts that objects of worked stone have been found in tree trunks, but he explains that the Santals often steal trees, but they do not chop them down in the usual way because that would make too much noise. Instead, they insert stone wedges and hammer them. Then if they should be caught, wedges would not be evidence against them that axes would be. Or that a pickpocket, for instance, is safe, though caught with his hand in one's pocket, if he's gloved, say, because no court in the land would regard a gloved hand in the same way as a bare hand would be regarded.
No, my hand was not in the pocket.
That's right.
It was in the glove.
It's mere coincidence that the glove was also in that pocket. I love this defense. Dr. Botting collected 50 of these shaped stones that were said to have fallen from the sky over the course of many years. He says that the Santals are a highly developed race, and for ages they have not used stone implements, except in this one nefarious convenience to him. So he collected 50 stone implements that had been stuck in trees, said to have fallen from the sky by natives, and he says, no, these are stone implements that they were secretly using to steal trees from people.
I just want one
Right.
stone implement that's been in a tree.
As to thunderstones not said to have fallen luminously, and not said to have been found sticking in trees, we are told by faithful hypnotics that astonished rustics come upon prehistoric axes that have been washed into sight by rain, and they then jump to the conclusion that these things must have fallen from the sky. But simple rustics come upon many prehistoric things: scrapers, pottery, knives, and hammers. We have no record of rusticity coming upon old pottery after a rain and reporting the fall of a bowl from the sky. In Notes and Queries, a writer says that he had a thunderstone which he brought from Jamaica. The description is of a wedge-shaped object, not of an axe, and it shows no mark of having been attached to a handle. Of 10 thunderstones figured upon different pages in Blinkenberg's book, 9 show no sign of ever having been attached to a handle, and 1 is perforated. But in a report by Dr. C. Lehmans, director of the Leiden Museum of Antiquities, objects said by the Japanese to have fallen from the sky are alluded to throughout as wedges. In the Archaeological Journal, in a paper upon thunderstones of Java, the objects are called wedges and not axes. All of which lands us in confusion. Worse, I think, than we were before we so satisfactorily emerged from the distresses of butter and blood and ink and paper and punk and silk. Now it's cannonballs and axes and discs. If a lapstone be a disc, it's a flat stone at any rate. A great many scientists are good impressionists. They snub the impertinences of details. Had he been of a coarse, grubbing nature, I think Dr. Botting could never have so simply and beautifully explained the occurrence of stone wedges in tree trunks. But to a realist, the story would be something like this. A man who needed a tree in a land of jungles, where for some unknown reason everyone's very selfish with their trees, conceives that hammering stone wedges makes less noise than does the chopping of wood, so he and his descendants, over the course of many years, cut down trees with wedges and escape penalty because it never occurs to a prosecutor that the head of an axe is a wedge.
It's a strange way to put it. It's hard to follow.
That was him slamming the explanation there. He's like, so this is the story you're telling us, that in a land of jungle, there are people that steal trees, and that they have been doing this for years and years using stone implements that they haven't used for generations. And they use wedges that they hammer instead of axes because somehow that's quieter. And if they get caught, no one will think that that they were actually stealing the trees with those wedges, because no one connects the fact that axe heads are just wedges.
Okay.
It's a stupid story is what he's trying to say. Yeah. I just, he does do it weirdly.
Yeah, it's so weird that I'm like, I'm just like, okay, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I get what you're saying. I'm fascinated by the fact that this guy collected 50 of these things.
I know.
All right.
Why are they landing in trees? Like, I don't know. Are they landing there? This doesn't make sense.
I don't know. Yeah.
Or is it just that since it's jungle, right? It's like there's so many trees that they're probably in the ground around there too, but
yeah, that's the other thing I would like to know is how they what is exactly what state are they found in the tree?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't cut down a tree by just driving a wedge into the side of it, right?
If it was driven into the side, it would not I wouldn't imagine anybody would think that fell from the sky.
Right. Yeah.
I'm in my mind, I'm seeing it like up where the main original branches split.
Yeah.
There's like a wedge driven straight down.
Yeah.
But then again, like, how do these wedges fall with the point
first
down?
Yeah.
Or are they actually in the ground too? If they are falling, they're
Yeah.
just like laying around and.
Yeah, and trees can pick up stones out of the ground, and they end up in the tree, or they end up in a burl or something, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's kind of. I don't know about that, but.
Well, how do frogs end up in trees? You know, in perfect frog shape. But yes, cannonballs are found in trees. Mary, he made this point before.
Like, in other words, if a tree, let's say a rock gets stuck in a tree, a foot off the ground, like it's stuck, wedged in between a branch or whatever, and it's like a foot off the ground.
Mm.
Does that branch just continue to rise up as the tree grows? No, that branch stays there, a foot off the ground. It just gets fatter.
Right.
The top of the tree is growing new stuff higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
So it's not like the rock's going to get just picked up.
I mean, it does get a little higher, you know. I mean, I've definitely noticed this with the trees that I'm trimming. These trees that I'm trimming, like, you know, I trim it at I make the split at, say, waist level, and then the next year it's like at chest level. Like, it is getting taller.
Okay.
You know, but you're right. It isn't just going to push that branch all the way to the top of the tree or whatever. But yeah, they will go up, I guess. Just they also grow outwards.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It is, you know, in detail. Like, I wonder what the provenance of these things are. Like, do the natives think that they fell out of the sky? That's clearly the idea, that they're thunderstones. Did they think that just because they found them in trees? Or did they see these things happen? You know, oh, that tree got struck by lightning. Let's go check it for a thunderstone.
Yeah.
And then the question is there, like, how do they view those
Just
things?
seems like if that is happening, then it wouldn't be damned anymore for some reason. Like I don't know. It seems like old forests would be full of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
And they would be known.
Like, is there impetus in the tribe or whatever to, like, this tree got struck by lightning, to go over there and then come back with an object that you say is a thunderstone?
Mm-hmm.
Because now it's a sacred thing, you know, now it's a valuable object. I don't know. And then you end up with this guy who's collected a bunch of them, and he's trying to come up with an explanation.
He's probably paying for them too.
Yeah, he might be paying for them. Yeah.
As soon as somebody pays for one, you're going to start finding more.
That's right. I mean, that's how you end up with 50.
That's right.
Wait, he bought that thing? Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's why it's better to have the ones with witness accounts.
The really strange thing about it, though, is that they're claimed to have been found all over the world by these different people. It's like, what? That's the part that gets me.
Yeah, and they have different names all over the place. Yeah,
that's wild. Something is going on.
Yeah, yeah. It is.
It's strange. All right.
Okay. You guys can get a hold of us, Brothers of the Serpent, at gmail.com. Check the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. If you want to support the show, you can do that. It's the pyramid scheme. You can do that through Patreon or PayPal. You can find links to that on the website. Thanks so much to all of you who have done that. We have been releasing some of the bumper music on the Patreon feed, and we'll continue to do that on occasion. So those of you who like the bumper tunes that we use and would like to hear more of them, or at least more of the songs, than the little bits that we have on the show, in some cases you'll be able to do that in the Patreon feed. And you can join the Discord. It's a very large chat server now with more than 1,000 members. Jeff runs that place along with a bunch of admins. They're all great. So yeah, join the Discord. Be nice in the chats if you join, and you will be expected to pass the test to prove that you're not a troll or somebody there to preach about something. I mean, you can preach, just do it on the, kind of like tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, do it in the soccer room.
That's right. Preach in the soccer room. There
Preaching
you
is only allowed there. The International Language of Love.
That's right.
Room.
Go to International Language of Love
there
if you want to preach. That's where all preaching is done on the server. And thanks to History Shift, who has made our YouTube channel possible. Thank you so much to him. He's put a lot of work into it. And yeah, like I said, thanks to Jeff for running the Discord. And thanks to all of you listeners out there. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.